Tonight, we are going to celebrate all the brand new heavy metal bands that hit the scene in 1984, and there are some great bands in this mix. One of those bands, Spinal Tap. We're going to put a spotlight on not just their album, but their movie. Listen, every episode of The Metal Dude goes to 10, but I have a feeling this one might reach 11. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of The Metal Dude Abides. You really cannot tell the story of heavy metal in the 80s without bringing up the great mockumentary Spinal Tap, complete with a band, a movie, an album, the whole works. This is one of the most hilarious chapters in the heavy metal lore, if you will. Many bands have cited their own Spinal Tap moments of where they were on the road and ran into all sorts of problems, similar to what Spinal Tap shows in this movie. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this movie, let me just first and foremost say you got to go see this movie. If you're a fan of heavy metal, rock and roll, or just good comedy, Spinal Tap is one of the all-time best movies ever made. Kind of a sleeper when it came out. It kind of became one of those cult classics that kind of grew in popularity when it got distributed in, back then VHS, but also DVDs. The synopsis is pretty straightforward. This is one of the loudest bands of England. That's their little moniker there. They are kind of on the skids a little bit. Their career, whatever it was, is not that anymore. Their popularity has waned. They're kind of struggling to find that commercial success again. But there's excitement because they have a brand new album coming out called Smell the Glove. There's a big record party for them and everything, but the record label balks at their controversial album cover, which has a female on all fours while the band puts a glove in her face. So they decide they're not going to go with that one. So the manager's like, "Don't worry, I'll find a compromise, that will satisfy the record company." And so when the album comes out, it's just a black cover, nothing on it. None more black, I believe, is and he convinces them this is really a good thing. Ironically, we talked a lot about Metallica running into the same issue with their debut album. The record company balked at their original album cover for Metal Up Your Ass. And then, 5 albums later, they themselves put out one of the most famous albums of all time, the Black Album. They drew inspiration from this Spinal Tap story. They even talked to Spinal Tap about it, I believe, had a good laugh about it. So now, as you can tell, things aren't really going well for Spinal Tap. There's a few mishaps along the way. I'll mention just a few. Don't want to spoil too much of the movie in case you haven't seen it. One scene where they are ready to go on stage, and so they go charging off out of their dressing room to go, get to the band. I think they were in Cleveland or something, and they get lost backstage, and they keep going round and round. They keep running into the same janitor who keeps trying to tell them where the stage is, and they can't find it. And I know that when you talk to a lot of metal bands about this, they say, "Oh man, there's been times where we've been lost in an arena somewhere and could not find the stage entrance ourselves." So we relate to that. Another funny incident, they are doing a very dramatic number on stage where the 3 band members, the guitarist and the singer, are all in these pods, alien pods of some sort. And so one by one, they come out and do their dramatic thing. They play their song, and then when the song's over, they dramatically go back into these pods and they close up on them, right? So the lead singer comes out, the lead guitarist gets out, but the bass player's pod doesn't open. So he's in there stuck in the pod, and there's all sorts of roadies. They've got welding torches. They're trying to get him out of this stupid pod, right? The whole song plays. The lead guitarist and the lead singer go back in their pods. They close. About that time, the pod for the bass player finally springs open. He jumps out, realizes, "Oh, wait, the song's over. I got to get back in my pod." It closes back up before he can get back in the pod, except for his arm. Really funny stuff. The other incident, maybe my favorite little mishap they have, they decide to really perk things up to do a live Stonehenge set where they have this towering Stonehenge behind them, and the guitarist Nigel, not the sharpest bloke in the world, right? He draws a picture of Stonehenge and he puts the dimensions on this cocktail napkin, but puts in inches rather than feet. So instead of this monstrous Stonehenge coming down from the rafters, this little bitty Stonehenge comes down, and these two dwarves dance around it. Later, they're all embarrassed. It's like they can't believe it. And they're yelling at their manager about what went wrong. And the lead singer, I think, says, "We just did the only production of Stonehenge where Stonehenge almost got trampled by two dwarves." Really, really funny stuff. So it is about a band who's, kind of on their last legs and running into nothing but trouble. But these guys really performed some music on this thing. Let's talk about the music next. What's really impressive about all of this is that the band themselves is the cast members. And they had a long history of, just for whatever reasons, kind of running into each other and playing music with each other in the past. So it's kind of funny that, I'm not going to sell you that this is like the greatest heavy metal music you're ever going to hear, but, it's not bad. Pretty well done, and it is hilarious. My favorite song on this album, and it's not even close, is a song called Big Bottom. Talk about mud flaps, my girl's got 'em. One of the funniest songs you're ever going to hear. Just so much innuendo and talking about booties. I don't know for sure. I've never read this anywhere, but I do sometimes wonder if it's a parody of the Queen song "Fat Bottom Girls." But anyway, if you are like, I don't know, if you're going to listen to one song of Spinal Tap's, that's the one. I think it cracks me up every time I hear it. 40 years later. The really funnily title, I have to read it because it's so ridiculous. Tonight I'm gonna rock you tonight. That's kind of funny, and again, a pretty good song. I like Heavy Duty. There's a song Sex Farm. They do the song Stonehenge on the album. Pretty good little heavy metal number. Anyway, some real good music on this. Like I said, not only did they produce a movie, but they actually did produce this as an album. So if you're really interested, it's probably a collector's item somewhere. But I keep talking about the cast. Let's talk about the people who put this thing together, because they're some of my all-time favorite actors. First and foremost, this movie was directed and produced by Rob Reiner. You probably know him. If you're as old as I am. He was the son-in-law meathead on the politically charged show All in the Family in the 70s with Carol O'Connor. He was the very liberal son-in-law who was constantly getting into fights with his father-in-law. So they were kind of the tension point of that show. Anyway, he goes into producing and directing movies and comes out of the gate just smoking. Spinal Tap's one of the very first movies he does. He also does The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally. He had a string of hits right there in the early 80s. I'm not sure that he's doing much anymore. He's, probably really old now, and is probably kind of semi-retired, but really hit a string of great movies in the early 80s that were all, either big hits or became like Spinal Tap cult classics. Now, for the band members themselves, the first one, David St. Evans, that is one of my favorite actors of all time. Michael McKean. He was in, if you're as old as I am, we're going to go all the way back to the 70s with these people. He was in a show called a sitcom, Laverne and Shirley, which was a spin-off, if you will, of the TV show Happy Days. Laverne and Shirley were these two single ladies that lived in an apartment, and next door was these two doofuses, Lenny and Squiggy. Michael McKean was Lenny. Pretty funny stuff because they're really dopey, that type of sitcom character. I don't really see him again until like 1980-ish, where Lenny and Squiggy appeared not as Lenny and Squiggy, but as these like tech nerd geniuses in the movie Used Cars. I bring this up because Used Cars is one of my all-time favorite movies. Kurt Russell, If you don't know, again, going way back, he was like a child star for the Disney movies, kind of this clean-cut image. So he starts to say, well, I want to be in adult movies, not those kind of adult movies, but more racy roles. So used cars, he just says, let's do it. And he plays a sleazy used car salesman. It is a raunchy movie, but again, absolutely one of my favorite movies. So hilarious. And again, Lenny and Squiggy kind of playing these tech nerd geniuses who can interrupt satellite transmissions from the presidential address, etc. Pretty good stuff. Of course, Michael McKean is in a number of things in the 80s, but I do want to also mention something he did pretty recently. One of my favorite all-time television shows, Better Call Saul. He plays Jimmy's brother, Chuck. Now, I'm not one for drama series, generally speaking. One of the best TV shows, it's a drama, and the interactions between the two brothers is particularly riveting. Michael McKean, I don't know, should have won several Emmy Awards or whatever the awards they give for best TV shows, best portrayals. He plays this like brilliant lawyer who's been stricken with this phobia of ever leaving his house. And he's got this love-hate relationship with his brother. His brother's got this love-hate relationship with him, trying to impress his very smart brother. But, you know, Better Call Saul, if you know the backstory, kind of likes to cut the corners a little bit, which enrages his brother. It's really the interaction between those two brothers, maybe the best thing I've ever seen on television. Love that stuff. So Michael McKean, he plays the lead singer, and he plays the lead singer like that kind of, I don't know, prima donna lead singer. He's got the girlfriend that's kind of coming between him and the band. The whole works, plays it to a T. Really love his character. And the next person I bring out is Nigel, the guitarist, played by Christopher Guest. Christopher Guest is so funny. He's like a duke or a knight or a House of Lords guy now over in England. He's married to Jamie Lee Curtis. He's leading a good life over there. But he also, after Spinal Tap, right, he goes and he's the six-fingered man for The Princess Bride, which we just talked about. So him and Rob Reiner reunite for that movie. And he must really love these mockumentaries, because he goes in and does a string of them, and they're all very good. Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, etc., etc. He wrote a lot of those with the dad from American Pie and Schitt's Creek, Eugene Levy, another really funny human being. So these guys have been very prolific in a lot of varied projects. Really good stuff. And finally, Derek Smalls, the bass player, played by Harry Shearer. I haven't seen him in as much things as those other two. He's kind of in the background kind of guy. Does a lot of the voices for The Simpsons. But if you want to see something really funny with him, he did I don't know what, like an inspirational video with Martin Short, where they're trying to get into the synchronized swimming team for the U.S. Olympics, and like Martin Short can't even swim, and they've decided to do the synchronized swimming thing. It is hilarious. It's just probably a 3 to 4 minute little bit, but you can probably find it on the internet. Really good stuff. The other thing I would like to point out is there's a ton of great cameos from different actors. One of the things you notice is I've talked about the bass, talked about the guitar, the singer. I haven't talked about drummers. It's like my show, right? Where's the love for the drummers? Well, the whole lore around Spinal Tap is they can't keep a drummer because they keep dying on them. Ed Begley Jr., I believe, is the first drummer they have, Stumpy something or another. I think he's the one who dies in a bizarre gardening accident. One of their drummers self-emulates on the in concert, right on his drum kit. And you know, I think Nigel says, we just found a little globule of him on the seat. So, you know, they go through a ton of drummers, but also some good cameos. Billy Crystal plays a mime of all things in this. Of course, Billy Crystal goes on to be reunited with Rob Reiner in The Princess Bride and When Harry Met Sally. So they have a pretty good relationship there. One of my favorites, Paul Schaefer, for again, all you that remember the old David Letterman show. He was the music director on there. He plays a guy, Marty Pufkin or something of that nature. As a man, I'm asking you, kick my ass. You know, hilarious bit from him. So anyway, as you watch this movie, just keep your eyes out because there's a lot of different big cameos from a lot of different actors and actresses that were either famous at the time or went on to be famous, etc. So anyway, enough about Spinal Tap the movie. You have to go see it if you haven't seen it. If not, you know, pull out the DVD. I don't even know if people use DVDs. Streaming services, it's probably on all sorts of streaming platforms. Go out and watch it again. It is an all-time classic, and again, part of the heavy metal lore that was the 1980s. Remember, a lot of the hijinks they're having was because they were having these elaborate stage show accidents. And right here for those of you who weren't around in the 80s, the heavy metal bands were putting on some of the most outrageously lavish stage shows you've ever seen. This is right in the middle of Iron Maiden's Power Slave tour, full Egyptian stage shows, productions, you name it, you know. 10-Foot Eddie's coming out on stage. Dio's about to do his Sacred Heart tour with, you know, fire-breathing dragons and laser knights and, you know, all the infamous things. You know, Rob Halford coming out on his Harley, getting hit by this metal beam that's swinging around, and him and the motorcycle go down in the dry ice, and no one even knows he's there because there's, you know, a foot of dry ice on the stage. These are all the things that, you know, you can relate to when you start seeing the movie Spinal Tap. Hilarious, hilarious. But the question is it good enough to make the 5 nominees for Newcomer of the Year? Let's go find out. By the way, side note here, as I was doing research for this and I was looking at newcomers and I saw the Spinal Tap, I knew right away I would want to do a spotlight on Spinal Tap. I kind of thought it would be funny, like it's been 41 years, like the 41st anniversary of Spinal Tap. That'll be kind of funny. And then I realized, lo and behold, there's a 41st anniversary of Spinal Tap coming on. They're actually going to do a sequel, Spinal Tap 2. I think the working title is The Continuation of the End, where they're going to have a reunion tour. I think this thing's supposed to come out this year, this fall, like September, October timeframe. So, hey, we might be getting a brand new Spinal Tap movie, probably some new music. This is going to be great. Go out and celebrate one of the great reunions of 2025. Spinal Tap is back, or so the rumors are. Anyway, let's go check out the nominees for Best Newcomer of the Year, 1984. Our first nominee for 1984 Newcomer of the Year, one of my all-time favorite bands, Armored Saint, and their debut album, March of the Saint. If you know the metal dude, you know Armored Saint, a band that I have loved for years and decades, and one of my favorite lead singers of all time, John Bush, who does some great work in Armored Saint and also a few years later in Anthrax. This is just a bunch of dudes from Southern California that went to high school together. The Sandoval brothers started this. They went to the same high school with Joey Vera, the bass player. Dave Pritchard apparently went to kind of a rival high school, but they all knew each other really well. Started Armored Saint, and boy, do they come out of the gates smoking. I love this very first album. The title track is excellent. Maybe one of their biggest hits comes right after that, Can You Deliver? If you want a, more of a deep track on this one, Take a Turn is also very good. But this album is excellent. They would go on, of course, to do a couple other really good albums. Love Symbol of Salvation. Love Raising Fear. This band part of that big burgeoning LA scene. I think Armored Saint kind of ran into the same problems that Metallica did, in that they were a little heavy for what was going on in LA, so they kind of didn't quite fit into the scene that they were in, which kind of maybe caused them to kind of come out of the gates a little bit slower than they should have. Maybe they should have moved to San Francisco when Metallica did. I also tell the story that not only was John Bush recruited to be the lead singer of Metallica, Joey Vera was also recruited to replace the late Cliff Burton in Metallica. So the guys from Metallica recognized the talent of Armored Saint. But again, I think Armored Saint a little bit maybe ahead of their time, a little heavier than the scene that they were coming out of, and the record labels just didn't quite know what to do with them. But we don't have to worry about any of that. Go back through the catalog again. Symbol of Salvation, Raising Fear, and this bad boy right here, our first nominee, March of the Saint. Our second nominee is another one of my favorite heavy metal bands, Metal Church, with their self-titled debut album. This is obviously the original lineup of Metal Church, and people consider the classic lineup of Metal Church. Metal Church would hold this particular lineup for their very first two albums. Both of those albums are excellent. That original lineup included Kurt Vanderhoof, who was the founder of Metal Church. He was the guitarist who decided after two albums, he still loved the band and everything, but life on the road was not for him. So he remained with the band, but didn't perform with the band any longer. He was in the background, helping them write songs, helping them arrange the music, but his performing days were over, at least for a while. He was replaced by John Marshall, and the reason I bring this up is John Marshall has two very distinctive things about him. Number one, he may be the largest human being in a heavy metal band history. Dude's like 6'7", and he's not beanpole skinny either. He's like a massive individual. I remember seeing him the first time going, whoa, that dude just towers over the rest of the band. Pretty funny. Secondly, he came to Metal Church he had been a roadie, the guitar tech for Kirk Hammett for Metallica. And so in a few years, Metallica is going to have one of their own Spinal Tap incidents where James Hetfield's going to be badly burned in a concert up in Montreal. So Metallica comes to Metal Church and says, hey, can we bring John Marshall in to help us finish off the tour while James Hetfield recovers? So temporarily has come in and helped Metallica a few times, definitely an honorary member of that band. So anyway, the other prominent member of the original is a lead singer by the name of David Wayne. David Wayne he's going to be replaced by Mike Howe. And Metal Church was a little bit ahead of their time, right? Some of these bands that are really heavy did not quite have the audience yet. As the thrash metal movement moves to the 80s and heavier music starts to become more in vogue, people discover Metal Church, but a lot of people didn't even discover Metal Church till Mike Howe was already the band. So he's kind of, sometimes people think of him as the lead singer, but on these first two albums, it is David Wayne. What an incredible voice. I'll just go through one of my favorite Metal Church tracks of all time is right here on this debut album, Gods of Wrath. And in particular, one of the reasons it's one of my favorites is because David Wayne sings the absolute heck out of that song. The title track, very good. Also, they do a cover of the Deep Purple song, Highway Star. And a really good version of it at that. So if you've never gone back into the catalog, or maybe you missed Metal Church altogether, go back, especially these first two albums, and you're going to find one of the greatest bands in heavy metal history. Our third nominee is Rat, with their mega hit, Out of the Cellar. Rat is probably by far the most commercially successful of the five nominees. They are about to be launched into the upper stratosphere of heavy metal commercialism. And one of the questions you might have is, why? First of all, Rat's music kind of fits in, again, better in the LA scene than, say, Armored Saint or Metal Church. Not quite as heavy, again, more of that glam metal that's in vogue in LA at the time. But secondly, and I think most importantly, Rat understands the era that they're in, and how doing things visually impressive is just as important as being audio impressive, right? So I don't want people to think, whoa, what are you saying, that Rat's just a gimmick band? No, not at all. But what I am saying is, in order to be successful in the 80s, you had to understand how to put together a video package, just as important as putting together a studio album. Case in point, their first video, Round and Round, became a huge hit. And it starred one of the biggest Hollywood actors of all time, Milton Berle, Uncle Milty, who not only performs it as Uncle Milty, but as Aunt Milty too. He does his famous drag Milton Berle person in there. I mean, for a debut album from a pretty unknown band, you get Milton Berle into the deal, that's going to instantly give you a lot of eyes on the product. And they would just, throughout their career, I thought Rat probably did better with videos than most bands, their compatriot bands of the time. They also understood beautiful women is a good marketing scheme. So they kind of were one of the first bands to really put beautiful women on the front of their cover. On their very first album, again, Out of the Cellar, they have Tawny Katane on the cover. She was a girlfriend of guitarist Robin Crosby at the time. Of course, Tawny Katane, famous for her movie Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks, but also became the future wife of David Coverdale, and appears in their trio of videos off the Whitesnake album, including Still of the Night. So she's a very famous person in the heavy metal lore. She appears on their first cover, and then their second album, they tap into the Playmate of the Year that year, back when there was this magazine, Playboy magazine. I'm sure it's long gone, but they would have a centerfold every month, and then at the end of the year, they would announce who the Playmate of the Year was. 1984 Playmate of the Year, just throw them on the front of the Rat cover. Invasion of Your Privacy, or whatever the name of that album was. So they understood, when you go to the record store to get that record, you see the beautiful girl on the cover, that's a good selling point. So again, Rat really understood how to visually lure people in. And then once you got lured in, that hit you with Round and Round, Wanted Man, one of my favorite, Back for More. That was actually on their very first Rat EP. They brought it back for the album because it's an excellent song. Our third nominee, Rat, Out of the Cellar. Our fourth nominee, Wasp. Blackie Lawless and the Boys. They show up with their self-titled debut album. And I gotta give credit where credit's due. It's kind of hard to become controversial before you've even put out any music, but Wasp pulled this off beautifully. They had a song that was going to lead this album. I don't know what the rules are for YouTube, so I'm not going to say it, but let's just say the song was called F Like a Beast. Well, we're in the mid-'80s now, and there is a group called the PMRC that is out to wreak havoc in the heavy metal world by putting warning labels on albums, whatnot. I always liked what the great philosopher Lemmy had to say about that. He said, don't just put one sticker on my album, put two. The whole point of rock and roll is to piss off your parents and probably help my sales, right? I loved his approach to it. But anyway, the PMRC went to the record label, and they put together a list called the Filthy 15 songs that are just this atrocious songs that are contaminating the minds of the youth. So the record company went to Wasp and said, listen, we don't need this kind of smoke. You guys haven't earned that kind of street cred yet, so take it off the album. So Wasp was forced to, if you have the very original album, the song is not on there. Now, at the time, kind of hard to believe, but England says, yeah, we don't have any problems with any of this. So they release it as a single over in England, and it just catches fire. Now the American audience it becomes an import, right? Where they're like, we want this song. So when they put the album out on CD, whenever we started pumping out CDs, late 80s or whatever, it goes back onto the album, and no one even batted an eye. But Wasp, always one of the, Blackie Lawless, it just seems like he's a magnet for controversy. And so he's already got controversy going before they even release the album. But with or without that song, this is an excellent debut. One of the other hits off this, they did a video for I Wanna Be Somebody. Pretty good track. My personal favorite on here, I think, is LOVE. All I Need Is My Love Machine. I like that. But here's the other thing. They also have a pretty big hit here called Sleeping in the Flame, which is a ballad. And that really is, it's kind of an impressive versatility that Blackie Lawless gets. Blackie Lawless, again, another huge mountain of a man, very intimidating stage presence, right? He can put out some of the most savagely controversial songs, but he can also come all the way around and put together a beautiful ballad. That is some versatility that most artists can't pull off. Wasp comes out of the gate swinging. Controversies aside, this is an excellent album. Our fourth nominee, Wasp. Our fifth and final nominee, Yngwie Malmsteen, with his album, Rising Force. Now, if you have been following the career of Yngwie Malmsteen, this guy was like a prodigy, teenage European guitar god who gets brought over to America. The record companies are trying to put him into a band and get him involved. So the first band they put him into is a band called Steeler with vocalist Ron Keel. Well, Ron Keel's much more commercially oriented than Yngwie. That doesn't work out. So he gets involved with Graham Bonnet in a band called Alcatraz. But much to Yngwie's chagrin, Alcatraz isn't much better than Steeler. They're still a pretty commercial band, not really what Yngwie is wanting to do. So he decides, you know what, maybe I'll just go do a solo album on the side where I can go and just play my guitar and play my classical style. Well, before this album even got started, him and Graham Bonnet got into kind of the most hilarious breakup of all time, in that Graham Bonnet gets so mad at him, he literally hits him with his mic stand in the middle of a show, and kind of a little bit of a brawl breaks loose. So obviously, Yngwie's no longer in Alcatraz, and this moves from a solo album to a solo career that, again, is still going to this day. Now, primarily this album is instrumental only, but I think when they started realizing this isn't just a solo project, this is going to be a band moving forward, you need a singer, right? So they bring in Jeffrey Scott Soto. He sings on a couple of songs, but again, primarily this is mostly instrumental tracks showing off Yngwie's style. I will say that the first time I heard Yngwie was on this album, and it was kind of like the first time I heard Eddie Van Halen. I had never heard anything like it. And honestly, in the case of Yngwie, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody since that plays the guitar like Yngwie Malmsteen. He is an absolute original. He is a maestro. I don't think people can recreate Yngwie Malmsteen. He's that good. A lot of guitarists now play a more classical style, similar to Yngwie. But man, you hear Yngwie come on there, you know it's him right away. What a legendary guitarist. Guitar World said this is the #1 album for like heavy metal shredding ever. I think it even, this guy, just an amazing player. And on this very first album, he gets a couple of his most famous songs. The first one, Black Star, that beautiful acoustic entrance. That's the way the album starts. Like, you get hooked in right away. I think Yngwie recently said, I'll be playing Black Star till the end of time. The other one, Far Beyond the Sun, another one of his all-time favorites that's going to be a staple of his live show forever. Having said all that, I like the Icarius Dream Suite number 4 or whatever it is, that at the time led off the second side of the album. Again, another purely classical piece, purely instrumental. I just can't believe how awesome it sounds. So, yeah, what a debut. And finally, Yngwie kind of has his own band and he can play his own style of music. And thank goodness, because he really never really fit in with that kind of commercial sound. He really finds his mark right here and puts out an awesome debut. Sorry, Spinal Tap. There's just too many great musicians in 1984 to make the list. And the winner is... I probably say this every episode, but this is so close. So many worthy candidates. But at the end of the day, I have to go with Yngwie Malmsteen, Rising Force, for one simple reason. There's very few times you look at an album and say this is not just a great start, but one of the greatest albums of all time, and that this album may be the greatest guitar album in the history of heavy metal. That's how good this is. Really tempted to go with Metal Church. I probably listen to Metal Church more now than I did, but man, I couldn't get enough of this Yngwie Malmsteen album. Absolutely a revolutionary album. Again, in that I'd never heard anything like it before that, and I haven't really heard anything this good since then. So sneaks past Metal Church. Now the Grammys that year, they went with Cyndi Lauper, and she had the big hit, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I never really cared too much for Cyndi Lauper's music. It was popular, and for those of you who may or may not know, I also delve into the wrestling world quite a bit back in the day. So she had put out a video with a very famous heel manager by the name of Captain Lou Albano. This led to that led to this. Cyndi Lauper ends up being in the run-up to the very first WrestleMania. Like, she got kicked in the head by Roddy Piper, so there's a good claim to fame there. So my wrestling and my music worlds kind of collide through Cyndi Lauper for a bit. But at the end of the day, you can't deny she had a huge hit, a huge album, but there's very little after that. Again, I've often talked about when you look at the Grammys, one hit wonder after one hit wonder after one hit wonder, one album wonders, people that were big in the day, and maybe that's what it should be, but, with the Grammys, I've always thought you should be looking at the bands that are not only, maybe not even all that popular, but are going to be a catalyst for change in the music. To me, Yngwie Malmsteen, still putting out unbelievable music to this day, revolutionized the way that guitar is played. He should not only win Heavy Metal Newcomer of the Year, he should win Newcomer of the Year across the board. My choice for Newcomer of the Year, Yngwie freaking Malmsteen. And that's our program. We are going to go through the year 1984. We're going to talk about the best vocal performances, the best instrumental performances. Gee, I wonder if Yngwie is going to be on that episode. But we're also going to talk about the best songs, the best albums of 1984. So many good bands, so many good albums. You want to stay tuned. You want to be tuned in for our upcoming episodes. The best way to do that is to ring the bell, subscribe to the channel, and get alerted to when we put out our weekly content. We shoot to do this every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Denver Mountain Time. And again, we've got some really good future shows lined up. So make sure you subscribe and get alerted so you will not miss a single episode. Yes, this one went to 11, but the rest of them are all going to be 10 out of 10s. Also, always, and I put this in every video, but please, put comments down below. What do you think the Newcomer of the Year should be? What did you think of Yngwie Malmsteen? Have you ever heard this album? What did you think of the movie Spinal Tap? Put your comments down below. I love interacting with fans. That's why I'm doing this, is to get other people to talk about all their memories of the great heavy metal of the 80s. Really fun for me to hear from you. But in the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.